Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Yes, You're Pregnant, But What About Me? By Kevin Nealon. Narrated by Kevin Nealon. Pre-birth. Ever since I was a little girl, I dreamed of being pregnant. When it finally happened, I couldn't have been happier. I suffered no morning sickness and had a relatively easy pregnancy. I loved every aspect of those 9 months. I enjoyed shopping for maternity clothes, reading all the books on child rearing, and exchanging information with other soon-to-be mothers. My appetite increased as expected, as did my waistline, but I didn't care. I was just enjoying the freedom to eat whatever I wanted. We now have a beautiful 2-year-old boy. We are so blessed. Monica Hatford, 29 years old, homemaker. I was worried about falling behind at work. The pregnancy came as a surprise, but a welcome one. I had never really thought about being a mother, but fortunately, it fit me well. Sometimes I wonder if I should have waited longer before having children, but this is the way it worked out, and I'm glad. I still miss people doting over me and my 38 double Ds. This pregnancy taught me patience and the ability to shift with change. Jonas and I got married shortly after little Sophia arrived, and I was able to pick up my career where I left off. Noel Rossman, 24 years old, computer programmer. During the pregnancy, I gained 25 pounds, lost many nights' sleep, and suffered months of anxiety and insecurity. What can I say? I was nervous and felt out of control. I understand the weight gain, and I'm determined to lose it over the next 3 months so I could fit back into my favorite pre-pregnancy clothes. Right now, I still can't even get into my fat jeans. Starting yesterday, I put myself on a strict running program, and I've only missed 1 day so far. I have to accept that my body has changed. The stretch marks are just something I'm going to have to live with. At my age, it may be difficult, but my hope is to get back down to my pre-pregnancy weight of 205 pounds and to finally catch up on some sleep. In the meantime, I have written this book about my journey through my wife's pregnancy, how it affected me, and how I got here in the first place. Kevin Nealon, 53 years old, comedian. Chapter 1. 120/80. I've always been a late bloomer. I didn't start dating until college. I didn't move away from home until 23. I was in my mid-40s when I started to shave, and I think only last month I started using the term dude. I'm not proud of being a late bloomer, but at this point, it's a reality I've come to terms with. It wasn't so much that I was unprepared for any of these life events. It was more that the time never really seemed right. I mean, come on, whoever wants to learn how to balance a checkbook, or invest in stock, or buy life insurance, or unclog a toilet with a plunger? These are not things that most people do for fun, except, of course, using a plunger. Given this slow trend on my part, it should not come as a shock that I came to fatherhood late in life, too, at age 53, to be precise. Unlike most of my late blooming, I actually wanted to become a father. I couldn't say why. It was just always something that I knew. Of course, in practice, the thought was terrifying, but still, I liked the idea of it. I thought the word dad had a nice ring to it, and I wouldn't mind if someone used it in reference to me, preferably my child. Like most men who decide to become fathers, I thought, how hard could it be? You walk through the supermarket and look at all the other people with kids and think, okay, if he's a dad and he's wearing a wallet chain and carrying a skateboard, then I could probably pull this off too. Everyone has different reasons for wanting to be a parent, and everyone's journey is unique. For some, it began on a honeymoon. For others, in a petri dish. And for some, perhaps it was merely the result of a wardrobe malfunction. As for me, my journey to child rearing began in a far less scandalous way and in a far more scandalous place, on a chance visit to a gypsy palm reader in Atlantic City. I was newly single and reeling from my divorce with my former wife. Like most stories that involve gypsies, this one took place on a blistering cold night as I strolled numbly along the desolate Atlantic City boardwalk. In a few short months, this very spot would be crawling with obese, sunburned, drunk tourists eating crisp, greasy summer food. Screaming kids would be whipping around on a tilt-a-whirl in the nearby amusement park, while teenagers would stand idly by intimidating adults with their sarcasm, chain-smoking packs of American Spirit and trying to convince members of the opposite sex that they were cool. Maybe if I were to walk this same stretch in a few months, the Miss America pageant would be taking place. Maybe as I walked by the venue, Miss Idaho or Miss New Jersey would be outside on a break, smoking a butt or sticking a finger down her throat. Maybe she would ask me if I had a light or a mint, and then maybe we would have struck up a conversation about world peace. Maybe I would have impressed her with my worldliness by flashing the 10 euros I had in my wallet from a trip to Euro Disney 2 years earlier. Maybe we would have talked about teeth whiteners and the merits of flossing. But it wasn't July, it was February. And in Atlantic City in February, there's none of that. Instead of summer sand blowing across the sun-baked wooden planks of the boardwalk, it was now dry snow and sleet whipped into a frenzy by an offshore gale. Most of the small, crappy tourist shops that sold the summer crap food and crappy T-shirts were boarded up for the season, and the wooden walkway was now covered with a thin sheet of dark ice. In hindsight, I guess I should have told someone I was venturing off on this bleak and ominous excursion so that they could have stopped me, but I didn't, and so here I was. This may have been why I ducked into a hole in the wall with a small flickering neon sign outside that read, Miss Adana's Palm Reading. But to tell you the truth, I really have no idea what made me go in there. Perhaps it was just to have someone to talk to, someone to tell me some good news, someone to give me hope and encouragement that I would meet someone else and be happy again. And if none of that, maybe just someone to assure me that my hands weren't really frostbitten. In retrospect, I'm not entirely sure why I thought a gypsy would bring me good news. Movies, which form the bulk of my preconceived notions about things and the basis for all my cultural stereotypes, always seem to portray gypsies as the bearers of bad news. They are the soothsayers and prophets whose visions are always the grimmest and least pleasant. Not to mention the fact that they steal babies and con unsuspecting tourists, or so I've heard. From Miss Adana's demeanor, I assumed she might be an Irish gypsy. She was wearing a lot of wrapped garments, stuff you would normally find draped over the back of a couch at your grandmother's, an afghan, a shawl, a half-knitted sweater, 2 cats, and various other laundry that was not put away. Her looped earrings were so big I expected a Cirque du Soleil performer to land on one at any time, and makeup covered every inch of her face. With an eyebrow pencil, she had colored on a fake beauty mark just off the left side of her nose and above the corner of her mouth. It's really the only good place for a beauty mark. One would not look good placed directly under the eye or on the chin. It would look more like a fly had landed on your face. As I was sizing her up, she was doing the same to me. I shut the door behind me and she peered into the blackness, almost as if she was checking to see if anyone had followed me. When she spoke, there was a husk to her voice that sounded as though she had been smoking cigarettes for quite some time, a practice that no doubt created quite the unfit environment for her latest crop of stolen babies. To make a long story short, but still longer than it was, the gypsy looked at my palm and without hesitation informed me that I had 3 kids I didn't know about. So much for my good news. She cut right to the chase. There wasn't even any verbal foreplay with my palm. She might have suggested that I would be coming into some money soon, or possibly even be losing some fingers due to frostbite. She could have broken it to me more gently by fixating on my palm and then suggesting the possibility that someone I had been with may have missed her period and then gradually broken the news. But no. She just spouted out that I had 3 kids that I didn't know about, and then surreptitiously glanced at me for a reaction. I don't remember too much else about her reading because, in my head, I had started going through my list. An image of a slightly used Rolodex emerged, and the small number of cards flipped by one at a time. There was the one with only the first name, Stacy, while another contained just a description, the girl from San Diego at that Irish bar. A minute or so later, Miss Adana handed me back my palm and charged me $85, which I later wrote off as child support. Miss Adana might have been a certified gypsy palm reader, but I was fairly certain that she made up the tale about the 3 kids. The likelihood of my having children I didn't know about was, well, highly unlikely. Don't get anyone pregnant was my mantra throughout my high school and college years. I'm surprised that I never got it tattooed on my arm. When I was younger, I was never a wild partier, but more significant was the fact that I was raised a Catholic. I'm paraphrasing a few of the popes here when I say that the central tenet of Catholicism for postpubescent males is, don't get anyone knocked up out of wedlock. My teenage years were consumed by the fear that I would accidentally impregnate someone, and most likely it would be a woman. My parochial high school upbringing had ingrained in me that not only would God disapprove of my premarital sex, but also my life would be ruined. It didn't matter whether you accidentally got someone pregnant. Perhaps it was a drunken one-night stand, a short relationship, a crush, staring too long, or brushing up against a stripper at a bachelor party in Tijuana. It didn't matter. That would be the person you would have to marry. If letting God down wasn't enough, I was also made aware that I would not have the free young man's life that other free young men would be having. Not only that, but I would be stuck with that baby's mother for the rest of my life. When the right girl came along, I would have this baggage and be unavailable, not to mention undesirable. This being a lot of fear and guilt for a teenager to bear, I had always worked hard at not getting anyone pregnant. Luckily for me, this hard work seems to have paid off, since no kid has showed up claiming me as its dad in the last several decades. One indication of Hollywood success is when an alleged illegitimate child or its mother shows up at your front doorstep demanding reparations and support. Though I'm still not sure what constitutes real Hollywood success, as a precaution I had my front doorstep removed. Maybe somewhere some woman was following my career and waiting for me to really make it big before she came a-knockin'. By the way, this is why I've purposely stayed away from doing the big blockbuster action movies. Either way, if that day comes and someone does show up standing in the dirt where my doorstep used to be, it will be a mixed blessing. On one hand, I'll know that I've truly made it, but I'll also have to pay a lot more than Miss Adana's $85. A couple of years after my run-in with Miss Adana, I met my current wife, Susan, and finally found the hope and happiness that I had been looking for when I went to visit the pessimistic gypsy. Susan and I got married and moved into a house several thousand miles from Atlantic City, but decided once again to remove the doorstep for safe measure. Our house was situated across the street from another that was rented by several kids. I called them kids, but they were actually guys in their early to late 20s. I'm assuming they were trust fund babies because they were obviously having a lot more fun than I was when I was their age. They seemed to have a lot of functions at their home, and by functions, I mean the alcohol-fueled, debauchery-laden parties that I might have enjoyed when I was their age if I hadn't been so worried about getting girls pregnant. After Susan and I had been living in our house for a bit, we started to have some friends come over to drink wine and talk about non-gypsy-related subjects that mostly pertain to getting older and the fact that we were experiencing pain where there was no pain before. On one such evening, I was preparing for our friends to arrive when I realized that the youth-infused house across the street was also getting ready to host an event. As I returned from the store with 3 bottles of a nice Napa Valley Pinot Noir for our party, I noticed the guys across the street wheeling a keg of Miller into their house. 2 other guys in UCLA t-shirts were inflating a small children's pool on the front lawn. From the recent cast of characters I had seen over there, I had a feeling the pool would not be for children. Once inside my house, I set the bottles down on the kitchen table, careful to move aside the latest Senior Citizens AARP magazine first. God forbid that should get wet. We had all we needed now for our little blowout. Actually, blowout is slightly exaggerating. It's more like our little gathering. We call our parties gatherings to avoid using the words and phrases that paint a more accurate picture of what it really is. A group of mostly 40 and over adults standing around, huddled like penguins, discussing the relative merits of California versus Australian Shiraz. One item that I found to be a big hit at our gatherings is a little something called a digital blood pressure machine. Several years ago, I bought one of these gadgets to keep an eye on my blood pressure. Incidentally, I love gadgets. I even like the word gadget. The word gadget is almost like a gadget itself. I guess it's the official name for a thingamajig. When Susan and I started having people over, I quickly found out that not only was this gadget a good way to assuage my neuroses about the possibility of having high blood pressure, but it made for an entertaining party game as well. Here's how it worked. During the middle of the gathering, I would proudly place the blood pressure machine on the ottoman and offer to take my guests' blood pressure. By their reaction, you'd think I just broke out the Hope Diamond. The process was very simple. I'd wrap the Velcro cuff around the guest's arm and then push the start button. The machine would then automatically take the reading. I knew that a normal blood pressure reading was 120/80, and I could then verify for people where their blood pressure was on the spectrum of things. The guests on this particular night were quite interested in the results and couldn't wait to be next in line. "What did you get?" someone asked. 126/78, replied our friend Rachel, whose arm was no thicker than a pencil. "What did you get?" someone else would ask. 160/95, they'd shout back, prompting an "Oh, you are screwed" from the others. It was a big hit. As I was taking another guest's blood pressure, for the second time, I glanced out the window at our partying neighbors and had what can only be described as one of those moments when you realize that age has a lot to do with things. Their front lawn was full of inebriated young co-eds, whooping and hollering, playing beer pong and jumping in that little inflated pool, half naked. And here we were, sipping our Pinot Noir and taking our blood pressure. With the cuff of the blood pressure machine tightening on me, I thought, when did this happen to me? When did I downshift into middle age? I didn't have an answer, but by my 152/91 reading, it obviously was bothering me. I guess if we really knew how to have fun, we would have made a drinking game out of taking our blood pressure. The person with the highest reading would have to guzzle his wine and then chase it with a shot of prune juice. We would then take everyone's blood pressure again, and the one with the highest readout would win. As all good things come to an end, our gathering eventually wound down. Sadly, it was still light outside. Based on the blood pressure results, several of our concerned guests had already made doctor's appointments. Others tried to remain as calm as possible and even laid down on the couch with their feet raised, trying to take advantage of the red wine's blood-thinning properties. When the final guest had gotten up the strength for his return trip home, I stood on the porch waving goodbye and couldn't help but notice once again the raging hormones from our neighbors' festivities. It was like the party that would not leave me alone. It kept calling out to me, "Come and join us. This is where you belong, remember? Come." I briefly entertained the idea of bringing my blood pressure machine over there, just to mix things up a little, and then thought, nah, better not. It might get wet. As people age, I've noticed an interesting concern arises. We seem to be more and more alarmed with the possibility of things getting wet. Potential wetness becomes a go-to excuse for not doing things. "Hey, Todd, you want to go swimming?" "Nah, we might get wet." Soon thereafter, my wife and I locked all the doors, turned off the lights, double-checked the lock on the back door, and went to bed. As I reached for my dental guard on the nightstand, I accidentally hit the remote for our posturepedic bed. It immediately raised my back to a level where I couldn't help but see out the window to even more young co-eds dancing and splashing in the little inflated pool. This party was not about to let me go. As I settled back down and closed my eyes, I realized that our gatherings really weren't so different. They also had gadgets, but instead of digital blood pressure devices, they had bongs and blaring ghetto blasters. These ghetto blasters, as it turned out, made it difficult to sleep. Susan and I lay in bed unable to sleep for what seemed an eternity due to raucous laughter and shenanigans coming from our insensitive, drunken, rowdy neighbors. Finally, my wife blurted out, "This is ridiculous. Don't they realize it's almost 9 o'clock? Honey, would you please do something about this?" Her request set off an alarm in me. Did I want to have this confrontation with a bunch of drunken kids? No, I hate confrontation. In fact, I'm not even good at being direct. It's a family trait. Growing up, if we wanted the salt during dinner, we wouldn't directly ask for it. We would merely say, "Is that the salt over there?" Or if we wanted the rest of someone's dessert, instead of clearly asking, "May I have the rest of your dessert?" we would say something like, "Are you going to finish the rest of that?" This, we assumed, would imply that we would like it if you weren't going to finish it. This indirect approach would more often than not result in confusion and me not getting what I wanted. This type of behavior would affect me later in life. When I started dating, it became very difficult getting to second base. I would say, "Does your blouse open?" "It does? Are those breasts? Are you going to be using those breasts?" But my wife was right. As much as I hated confrontation, I was the husband, and it was up to me to do something. I didn't want to be the bad guy in this scenario, but after all, weren't they disturbing our sleep? I swung my legs out of bed, slipped on my pants, zipping my fly up with extra determination and grit. I quickly pulled my sweatshirt over my head. Since there was no zipper to pull up hard, instead I tugged the back of the shirt down to cover some of my butt. I think Susan knew I meant business. There are some things in a marriage that the husband just has to do. I marched downstairs to our front door and fumbled for the light switch to our porch. I braced myself, then firmly flipped the light switch on and off 5 solid times. If that wasn't a strong signal, I didn't know what was. I confidently returned to bed, informing my wife that I had taken care of our problem. After another half hour of drunken revelry, I informed my wife that maybe they hadn't gotten my message. I thought to myself, what part of the blinking of the porch lights did they not get? I knew I would have to take a more forceful measure now. I jumped out of bed again and marched over to our window. Determined to end this madness, I firmly grasped the bottom of the window shade, then quickly raised and lowered it a solid 6 times. As I got back into bed, it dawned on me that I should have had the bedroom lights on so that they could see the contrast of the room going dark and light as the shade went up and down. Because of that, they once again didn't get the message that Mr. Nealon was disturbed. The party got more and more raucous, and finally I realized there was no other way around it. Sometimes you just have to confront a situation and get it over with. I would have to be a man about this and take the most drastic measure. Once again, I rolled out of bed, I stomped into the bathroom and removed 8 Tylenol PMs from the bottle in the medicine cabinet. We each took 2 with room temperature water from our preset bottles of Evian on our nightstand and then stuffed the rest in our ears. Dude, we shut that party down. In the days and weeks following our gathering and the party across the street, I looked back at my younger days, but as I reflected, I couldn't remember blowing it out as much as our neighbors were inclined to. I wasn't a prude, but I also wasn't a reckless, wild partier like most of them across the street. I went to parties. I saw couples pair off and disappear into the rooms upstairs. Don't they worry about getting pregnant, I thought? What if someone got knocked up at that age? Wouldn't that put the kibosh on their partying? How would they deal with that? I could only imagine how high someone's blood pressure would spike if they were saddled with that situation. The whole contrast of our party and our neighbors had really put age in my new perspective. This is not to say that I was having a midlife crisis, but I was becoming increasingly aware that I wasn't getting any younger, although I suppose that realization is what prompts most midlife crises. Since I had no kids that I knew of, I started to think it might be nice to have one soon, seeing as how I had been putting it off for a while. I was at that age when not only was my hairline receding, but so were my gums. It's like they were in a race to see which one could get behind me first. Between you and me, you really can't tell my gums are receding because I comb them forward. I was 52, and for the first time I started to feel the weight of my years. It's hard to tell the years and months in LA without the seasons. It is true, Los Angeles has television seasons, but it's just not the same. I mean, sometimes just out of nostalgia, when the fall TV season begins, I will wear my flannel shirts. But more often than not, it's just too hot. Without the seasons to measure years, the only gauge that helped me recognize increments of time was how much my friends' kids had grown and changed since the last time I saw them. Children grow so fast, don't they? It seems like 1 minute the kid is in a maternity ward, and the next minute it's in rehab. Another alarming lots of time has gone by wake-up call to me is when someone in their mid-30s approaches and tells me what a big fan they are and how they grew up watching me. When anyone, whether it's your kid or some guy in the street, comes up to you and says they grew up doing anything with you, it's official that aging has come to your house. Age creeps up on you and will frequently rear its head in different ways. I didn't think it would happen, but it did. It may sound cliché, but some younger people's music now seems like loud noise to me. Maybe some of it seems loud because it is loud. One of my pet peeves is when a car pulls up alongside me at a traffic light, and the young driver has his windows down and is blasting rap music loud enough for the whole block to hear. The pounding bass notes register a 7.9 on the Richter scale, and I fear my windows are close to splintering into 1,000 little shards. The audacity always amazes me. What makes him think I want to hear his music? Does he assume that I and everyone else within a square mile enjoy the service that he is providing? Does he just want everyone to know that he's party central? Well, guess what? Maybe today I am not a fan and I don't appreciate it. My road rage begins to rear its ugly head, and I start thinking, how would he like it if I went and got my favorite book, highlighted several chapters, and held it out my car window right in front of him? Here, read this, I would yell. Right here. See these paragraphs? Nora Roberts. It's okay, you don't have to thank me. It's a service I provide for everyone. Just want to let you know this is where the party is at. And what about having a baby at my age? Even if Susan got pregnant tomorrow, I would be 53 when the baby was born. I mean, it wasn't over for me yet, but I felt I was circling the drain. Incidentally, I love these phrases that signify someone is close to death. In fact, I've made up some of my own. He hasn't checked out yet, but they're bringing his luggage down. He hasn't bought the farm yet, but he's applying for a loan. The vultures aren't circling yet, but they're asking for permission to take off. She hasn't kicked the can yet, but she's taken one out of the pantry. I felt as though the curtain hadn't dropped yet, but I was somewhat into the third act. When I was 63, the baby would be 10. When I was 73, the baby would be 25. I know you're thinking my math isn't accurate. That's because my plan is to close the age gap over the years by using my wife's anti-aging moisturizing cream at night, and also by keeping it away from the baby. I figure I could shave off a few years with this strategy. My wife always uses moisturizing cream. It's amazing how many different types of moisturizers there are. They even have different moisturizers for different times of the day and different parts of your face. Occasionally, I could tell what time it is simply by looking at my wife's face. There are also correct and incorrect techniques for applying these moisturizers. Absolutely no rubbing under the eyes, just lightly dabbing. Apparently, rubbing would only encourage wrinkles and crow's feet. Once you are away from the eyes, you are free to rub, but ever so gently. I've also noticed that a product always seems to sell better if there's a story about how the developer came up with it. For the price of some of these moisturizer creams, there had better be some very good stories behind them. There's one very expensive moisturizer I've noticed in our medicine cabinet that was apparently developed by an astronaut to treat his burns from an accident. I'm guessing that this astronaut purposely tried to burn his wrinkles off. But, nevertheless, if it's good enough for his burns, it will certainly take care of that slight wrinkle I have on my forehead. More of a concern than the age difference for me was gas price differences. When he is 10, a gallon of gas will probably be $10.39 9/10. When he is 20, it will probably be $22.76 9/10. In all honesty, I'm confused about the rising price of oil. Something is not on the up and up, because I went into a pharmacy recently and noticed that the price of petroleum jelly has not gone up at all. Not 1 cent. I stocked up and got 3 cases because I know one of these days the man is going to realize that he hasn't hiked up the PJ, and then we're out of luck. Too bad our cars couldn't run on petroleum jelly. I guess it would be tough to get it in the tank, though. You'd have to work it in and around with your 2 fingers. Could you imagine the people lined up at pharmacies to get petroleum jelly? Thankfully, there are no more lines at gas stations. In fact, gas stations have become the new pickup places. Forget the club scene. Instead of sending a bottle of wine over to someone, you could send over some gas. "Excuse me," you would say to your service station attendant, "I would like to send $4.39 9/10 of your finest gas over to that young lady at Pump 5 in the Honda Civic, please." It's not just gas prices. Everything seems to be going up. I don't like it when that woman comes through the restaurant with a basket of roses. They're like $20 each for a single stem rose. I think that's pretty steep. I feel bad for the guy on his first date. He may not even like the girl he's with, but everyone is watching to see if he's going to buy a rose for her. It's awkward for him and for the date. That's all I'm saying. I mean, you don't see a guy coming through the restaurant with a bucket of tools, do you? Buy a wrench for your date, ma'am? I have 3/4-inch open end. I have ratchets, vice grips. Again, it's always one-sided. It was not that I never wanted kids. I always did. It was just that I was never ready to have them. The more I thought about it, the more the timing seemed right for me now that I was old. It must be the way I planned it subconsciously. I like planning things consciously and subconsciously. For example, there are a lot of DVDs that I purposely do not rent or want to watch now because I want to save them to watch them when I'm in a retirement home someday. The truth of the matter is, at that age, it probably won't make a difference whether I've already seen a certain movie or not. More than likely, I won't remember seeing it anyway. I wish I knew how to plan unconsciously. That would be so much easier. Anything that happened in my favor, I could take credit for planning unconsciously. I also think it would make life a lot easier for me if I could get things done unconsciously.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?